This video is brought to you by Graft. Escape a dark, decaying space station the size of a continent in this story-driven survival horror RPG from the makers of the Shadowrun trilogy. Stick around to the end to learn more. There's gotta be a breaking point in all of this, right? Every week is another story of layoffs, another story of worker mistreatment, another story of executives making millions of dollars while proclaiming a company needs to fire hundreds, if not thousands of workers to be more efficient. Today, the big story is focused on EA, as CEO Andrew Wilson has reportedly raked in a $38 million bonus for the 2026 financial year, up from $30 million in 2025. All against the backdrop of multiple rounds of layoffs at the company and an upcoming $55 billion sale to Saudi Arabia, which will undoubtedly go through because Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is involved, and our government is run by a family of professional fucking grifters. If that wasn't bad enough, the executive suite at EA also received hefty bonuses. CFO Stuart Canfield, $11.3 million. EA's president Laura Meal, $13.7 million. CPO Mala Singh, $8.3 million. Chief Legal Officer Jacob Schatz, $8.4 million. Since it should be clarified, these aren't directly cash awards, they're a mix of stock and cash. Wilson, over the last 3 financial years, has raked in $90 million worth of extra compensation. Combined with the other executives, 6 people have been awarded around $200 million of extra compensation in just the last 3 years. 6 people in a company of over 14,000. Again, most of this is stock rewards and not cash, but when the company is about to be sold to Saudi Arabia for $55 billion, they stand to make an absolutely absurd amount of money as a result. Over the last financial year, there were 4 rounds of layoffs at EA, and more are expected before the sale to Saudi Arabia goes through. All justified by the shareholders, despite all of EA's franchise properties meeting or exceeding expectations. And yet, 6 people stand to benefit the most from that work. It's fucking sick. And yes, I know, it's not limited to the games industry. At what point are people going to finally say enough is enough? I know some comments have pointed out my reluctance to use the word strike in past videos. I'm hesitant to make a declaration on behalf of other people who are more directly affected by a choice like that. It's not a simple decision to make, despite the internet often thinking it is. I'm just on the outside looking in and providing my observations. I fully understand the weight of such an action, though. In the current economic climate, it's simply better to have a job than not in many cases. Some stability is better than none. If you go on strike or join a union, are you making yourself unhireable for future positions? Can enough coworkers convince their peers to go on strike to actually make an impact? The games industry has more people wanting to work for it than jobs available, so they'll just hire someone to replace you that's willing to put up with the bullshit and the pay. Companies have learned to make people just comfortable enough to not push back for fear of giving up that comfort. But fuck. At this point, what did the people in the industry have to lose where there's seemingly no security? Battlefield 6 was one of the best-selling games of 2025, and the reward for a bunch of the people who worked on it was being laid off right after release. In fact, the financial report says pretty much every EA game met or exceeded expectations for the 2025-2026 financial year. These developers are busting their asses, and what's the reward for doing so? Laid off, or given raises that apparently don't even keep up with inflation, while the executives were given millions in bonuses. Everybody that isn't caught up complaining about wokeness in video games is disgusted by this. There's calls for boycotts, there's a lot of social media outrage about it. But again, I ask, where is the breaking point for developers to finally put their foot down on this endless greed and say no more? It was only a few weeks ago that the founders of Unknown Worlds won their lawsuit against Krafton because the CEO tried to cheat the founders and the workers out of a $250 million promised bonus if Subnautica 2 met certain financial expectations within a certain time frame. Hint, it well surpassed those expectations. I wrote last week about how Microsoft's CEO makes $96 million a year while laying off thousands upon thousands of employees. I'm watching videos from the Bethesda Union on Blue Sky from developers who worked at companies like id Software for 15 years and were essential to the company, laid off with no explanation and calling out Microsoft's excuse that they were streamlining management. Unions aren't stopping the layoffs, they just make sure you're getting a fair severance package. These companies are having discussions about games needing to be priced at $80 to offset production costs, while shareholders award hundreds of millions in bonuses to executive suites. They talk about how expensive it is to have developers in the biggest cities, while handing out those types of bonuses. They're looking to outsource work to countries around the world for cheaper labor, and make no mention of using that same money to better pay the talent they already have. This is a cycle that's never going to end unless some sort of regulations are put in place or game developers collectively stop allowing it to happen. At this point, it does seem like strikes, at least at companies like Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, and Sony, are almost a mandatory course of action for the industry. What other options are there if these companies have no incentive to change and the executives just keep raking it in? If you're a developer watching this and think I'm completely out of pocket for saying that strikes are necessary at this point, I'd love to hear from you why that is. This isn't just a games industry problem, it's every industry. Trust me, I understand that. These days, I'm just constantly wondering when enough is enough, or if we're all just comfortable enough to keep going through the same cycles over and over and over again as we watch the fruits of everyone's labor go to a very select few.
This video is brought to you by Graft, a story-driven survival horror RPG from the makers of the Shadowrun trilogy. Wishlist now on Steam.
Hey, remember how we met? You were sitting there on your bike and you just had to talk to me. You said seeing me, you felt a shock. And I said, No, not again. Wake up. Come on. Stay with me. There we go. Yeah, it's me. You're safe. I mean, not safe, but... No. You promised you could handle these changes. Listen to me, you have to slow down. You're slipping away. I don't even know who you are anymore. You don't know who you are. Maybe I don't even know what you are. Please, stay with me.